It's time for connection of the mind, body, and emotions. Welcome to a place where you can unplug, tune in, and create. It's time for Conjuring the Human Spirit with your hosts, Allison Parr-Plasha and Sean McGuire Meeks. You're invited. Let's begin.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Conjuring the Human Spirit. My name is Sean McGuire Meeks, your host, or one of, and then there's Allison Parr-Plasha sitting across from me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for listening.
So, Allison, let's conjure the human spirit today. How about that?
Let's do it.
Last episode, we were talking about initiation, and so we're going to dive a little bit more into initiation this episode. Wondering, Allison, what does initiation mean to you?
It's like, to me, initiation is like it's an invitation. Initiation is an invitation and being called forth into a bigger part of who we are. So, as a coach, I'm always kind of holding the perspective of supporting people and stepping into their full potential. Like, why are they here on earth? How do they align with the truth of who they are? So to me, initiation, it's a challenge. And there's different levels and layers of the challenges. But yeah, I see it as an invitation.
Yeah, does it come in the mail, or how do you get the invitation? Is it RSVP via Facebook? How's the invitation show up for you?
I think some people sign up for initiations. So, really when I go back to, it's interesting how Outward Bound keeps coming up, as we're sitting here in these different episodes. Outward Bound is, it's a 21-day program where you go into the wilderness. It's kind of like the School of Lost Borders in a lot of ways. And there's different programs. You could be doing like a sailing one. The 21-day program I did at 17 years old was hiking and canoeing. And we did a 3-day solo where we're on an island by ourselves and fasted. We were just given a tarp. So very kind of aligned. And then it's really learning the ways of nature in the woods and surviving. And so that was like...
I was saying that's something you chose to do.
It's something, my parents introduced it to me and I was all about it, but that was like a paid initiation, or like you hear people doing the vision quests or the vision fasts. And so there's a desire. And then I think the initiation we're going to be talking about today was not a conscious invitation, but perhaps, an invitation from my higher self, my soul. And maybe the same for you. How would you define it?
Well, I think you did it beautifully. Like the rites of passage stuff that I did at School of Lost Borders, I signed up for that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know the depth of the initiation. Like I didn't think, I'm going to sign up for this class and because I want to be an initiation. Again, it's that deep listening, that call of the spirit. Like this is the flow. This is where I'm supposed to go. Because when I did that, I was living fancy, loved to eat, and suddenly I'm crying, reading that I'm going to be fasting in the wilderness and sleeping under the stars without a tent and no food. I mean, that just wasn't anything that I knew I was really signing up for. So I didn't know what the initiation would yield, but nonetheless, I was called to do it. Mm-hmm. And then I think there's a conscious initiation, saying I'm going to do this so that I can initiate and have that. Father Richard Rohr talks a lot about cultural initiations where we have moments in our lives where we have to consciously graduate from being a boy to a man, being a girl to a woman. And now I'm at the stage of my life of being a man to an elder and being someone who's a teacher, these initiations, and marking those in a way that's poignant. It's just not just saying I'm going to go now from being a boy to a man, but really doing something fundamentally different in that's dramatic initiation, saying and signaling both to my fellow and to myself and to the universe that I'm ready to change. I'm ready to initiate myself into this next way. And in order to do that, I've got to be willing to change.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've been, a lot of, not a lot, but I have a handful of clients I'm often working with that are women going through menopause. So perimenopausal, that's a huge initiation. And again, it's an invitation, but it's kind of it's kind of like puberty. It's healthy. It needs to happen. And so, but it's a bit of a forced initiation. And I feel like you can also do initiations and react and respond to them in very different ways. I've noticed with menopause, I see women either walking across the coals is because that's actually kind of the true invitation. And it's very challenging. And you literally are like a snake shedding its skin. But I see other women, and you'll see this also with these forced initiations where they're like, I don't wanna, I don't wanna, I don't wanna. So they overdrink, they overeat, they overindulge, and they try to avoid it through numbing out.
Well, it's interesting. I've been in conversations with groups of women who did exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
And they're almost arguing with each other. Well, that's not my experience. I'm miserable. And the other one's like, I'm a butterfly coming out of the,
Yeah.
so it's just very different. And
Yeah.
that's interesting too. And how it's processed. Is that taught, do you think? Or is that learned or?
I think it's like that. This is a great question. I feel like, probably this podcast can kind of go on and on really when we look at like initiations and how we do them. So it's like, we have to look at, our families and our mentors and, would they cross that threshold, walk across the coals in a conscious way or an unconscious way? I think it's learned, or we see maybe our mentors or elders doing it in a way that doesn't feel right. And so we choose a different path, the harder path.
So we're listening actually to our spirit, witnessing someone else and saying, I think when that happens to me, I may handle that in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've heard of like the Peter Pan syndrome. So that's like boys not wanting to become men,
Right.
and so.
Yeah, the exaggerated South shield in this 4 shields of human nature work that I teach. It's really that playing video games all the time and not leaving the basement and not getting a real job, like this Peter Pan, staying this young boy and not initiating into the next realm.
Yeah, and when we talk about like our own initiations, you and I have had many dialogues of like, I don't want this, and wanting to, at least for me, check out in any or every way possible because I don't want to. But this invitation is the strongest invitation I've ever had, and there's just no getting out of it.
Yeah, and same for me. Just real quick around normal initiations, just to talk about today, these kids are graduating from kindergarten. I mean, it's silly. We just went to kindergarten, then we went to first grade. Now there's a party and there's a certificate and they're graduating to the first grade, and they're graduating second grade, and they're graduating third grade. None of that. But for when I was growing up, you graduated high school. That was the big deal. You graduated college, but just in human nature, there is the graduating of from these milestones that we say are important. So these are initiations. We get through high school, we get through college, we get married, we have babies, we get a job, we retire, we travel, and we die. These are the normal initiations, the last right initiation being death, of course. So these are things that we accept as normal initiations and almost expected initiations. And then we'll talk about initiations that we don't even consider being initiations, like the things that have happened with you most recently. And you want to talk about your initiation?
My anniversary initiation is coming up. So I think I had shared in an earlier episode with you listeners that, my husband and I had talked a long time about moving. I was meditating. Savannah, Georgia came to me. We went to visit a month later and we both were like, yep, this is it. So we made the decision to move. And I just remember it was September, almost 3 years ago.
I realized September.
I had an upper respiratory infection. It could have been COVID, but I didn't test, because I was just a bit over it. And it wasn't terrible. I wasn't terribly sick, but I developed a cough. The cough never went away. And I guess I would say the initiation really did start just because, I'm one who's like, oh my God, like I'm a yogi. I can like heal myself. And I'm just not one who's like always going to the doctor. I try to heal myself first.
But if I may, just to be clear, was this, you didn't hold it as an initiation when it was happening, right? So,
not at all.
Yeah.
And actually, because it's like I'm going a little further back than you probably expected. But it just, annoying cough, not uncommon for me. Like I would have a bronchial infection. I'd have annoying cough for a month and it would go away. So I called the doctor, and, interesting modern medicine, because there's been a big part of this initiation process for me. My experience is like, they don't want to see you. I'm calling to make an appointment, and they're like, oh, you probably just have allergies. So they were like doing everything in their power for me not to come in. And so I'm like, oh, I guess I shouldn't go in. So the cough continued. So the cough started in September. So now we're at February. And, they always say don't ignore the cough. But I guess I was ignoring it. I had made a slight attempt. I talked to my doctor, and she's like, well, you might want to get a lung x-ray, but whatever. It was just very, she wasn't very forthcoming. This time we had made the firm decision to move to Savannah. We had picked out a high school. Our daughter had picked out a high school for herself. She was moving into high school. And then my husband closed up his yoga studio. And then in the spring, he actually moved to Savannah to look
From Erie, Pennsylvania.
From Erie, Pennsylvania to look for a home. And our daughter was graduating from 8th grade, speaking of graduation and initiation. And I was out hiking in our woods, and a pretty intense hike. And I just remember, like, I could barely keep up with our old dog. And I just remember I called my husband. I'm like, man, I must be getting old. Like, my hike was so slow. He's like, you're not getting old. He's like, call the doctor. So I called the doctor, and I had to demand, because they were trying to tell me not to come in again. They're like, at the time, there were like wildfires in Canada. And they're like, oh, you probably just have allergies. Again, not wanting me to come in. And it was like a spirit descended upon me. And I was like, I'm not well. I need an x-ray now. And so I got an x-ray. And then they kept saying I had allergies. So I was getting like, I was at the allergist.
What about that spirit? What was that spirit you said descended on you?
It just came over, because it's like, again, they were like, we don't want to see you. Please don't come in. We don't want to see you. Please don't come in. And I can be intense. And this is when I got really intense, where I was just like, demanded. I had to demand to be seen. I had to demand an x-ray.
I see.
Because, again, they were doing everything in their power to not, see me. So not me personally, it's just what they do now. And so I'm at the allergist. I get a call as I'm waiting for the results. I'm sitting there by myself. So I'm like, I know you're not supposed to take a call. I pick it up. And they're like, you need to get to the ER now. Because my lung x-ray, I also got like a CT scan, indicated I had pulmonary embolisms like on my lungs.
Oh my gosh, Allison.
Right? So next thing I know, now I know why they write down emergency contacts. I'm in the hospital. Michael and Tazita were at a movie. They're called in. My sister is called in. They're all there. And I'm in the ICU for 3 days. So I was beyond blessed to not have died in those woods with my dogs, because pulmonary embolisms on your lungs, that can turn into a stroke. It can turn into death. And it's just a huge gift.
To be here.
To be here talking to you. Yes, there's some annoying things that have lingered.
About me? Or? I'm sorry. I kind of remember when this was going on.
Yeah.
I remember when you were hospitalized, and I remember reaching out. Somebody reached out where I got intel on what was happening with you.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I just had this sense. I know you were really going through it because I heard some of the details.
Yeah.
And yet I just had this sense that there was an initiation.
And you said that pretty early on, actually. And, looking back, I was getting like increasingly fatigued, but I just blamed it on the stress of the move, you know what I mean? Handling a household where my husband was gone. I just was kind of chalking it up to all of that. But my workouts, because I love to work out, they were getting just really bad. And I was like, again, starting to equate it to, I guess I'm just getting older. But looking back, it was pretty dramatic. So here I am, just not thinking anything's wrong. Here I am in the ICU. I didn't even know I was in the ICU. Michael, my husband, had to go home to go get something. He came back. He's like, did you know you're in the ICU? And I'm like, no. Like, no one was really telling us like the severity. But then it was just like a litany of questions and doctors, one doctor after the next coming in. I just remember it was kind of a little vague in my memory, but they were just trying to figure out what's going on. But as it turns out, they all thought I had metastasized lung cancer. So
Wow.
for 3 months, I lived with that.
Wow.
And I had a doctor.
You're talking about in your brain and your spirit, living with that diagnoses.
Yeah. Oh, and I didn't even share. It's like that first, here I'm just like, what is going on? And then next thing I know, I'm being woken up at 2 a.m. and they're like, we're going to do an MRI now. And, I'm hooked up to like, all these IVs and thank God, they're putting blood thinner into my system. So they literally take me to the basement of the hospital. And this is where the MRIs are kept. And it was like Waldemar, remember like Wacky, was it Wacky Shack?
Oh, the Wacky Shack, yeah.
With like those doors opening,
Amusement park in Erie, Pennsylvania.
It was so
oh, yeah. Oh, I remember those doors.
Oh, my God.
Oh, God, how funny.
It was so bizarre. So like door after door.
Yeah, so if you're Waldemar and you're in a cart, you're put in this cart, and it just abruptly like hits these doors to go into this fun shack, this Wacky Shack it was called.
Yes.
And that's what it felt like for you on that
but it was
gurney.
nothing but fun.
Yeah.
So I get down there and I'm greeted like by this foreign guy, I can barely understand him. So he says to me, so I hear you have metastasized liver, like that you have a tumor on your liver. I'm like, what? It was so bizarre. So he's like, do you need medication for the MRI? I'm like, I don't even know what an MRI is. So I'm like, no, at this point I was still like, oh, I've got this. And so I go in and I start to panic. And you're not allowed to move. And I'm like, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it.
So you're in, because you're on that table, right? And then they put you in this tube and it gets loud and scary.
And it's like 2 in the morning. Yeah. I barely know where I am.
Oh, God bless you.
And I'm like, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it. And then I heard, it's the sounds of the MRI, but to me, they were angels. And it was just like this, like this high pitch. And it kept me literally sane and tethered during that experience.
Well, how about that? Well, can we allow that to be angels too?
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Right. Because here I'm told, at this point, I didn't know they were thinking I had metastasized lung cancer, but I'm told that I have metastasized like liver cancer. And I'm like, it was just so out of left field. And then they stick me in this machine. And they were cold and abrupt and not kind. And so then I'm wheeled back up to my room. And then I had a doctor who did think I had this cancer, and she was like going to prove it. So they were talking about like no bedside manners. She was going to prove that I had it, and nothing was going to stop her. So they do this first biopsy. It's called a needle biopsy. So you're wheeled into this room. I had a really handsome doctor. I remember that, with these beautiful blue eyes like you, Sean.
Oh, thank you. We'll take blue-eyed doctors any day.
They could not have been lovelier. But again, before this procedure, I'm like in this wheelchair, like in a cold basement with all the other people. It was so like going back in time. We're all waiting for a procedure. I'm freaking out. Next thing I know, I'm wheeled in. I'm on my stomach. And I see this huge needle.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, are you going to put me under? Because I can see everyone. And he said, I'm so sorry, but you have to actually work with us. So no, we can't put you under.
What was the needle for?
My lung. They poked it into my lung.
Oh, gosh, stop.
Yes.
Oh,
so they
goodness.
were, and I
While
watched,
you were awake?
While I was awake, I watched the whole
gracious.
thing.
No,
and then they would have me
ma'am.
breathe and then not breathe, and because they needed me to be a participant. So anyway, I thought this was one and done.
You're talking about the needle one and done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then they're like, no, it came out clean. So they're like, we need another one.
Oh,
so the next one was a bronchoscopy where they put me under.
Oh, thank God.
And then they're taking tissues from my lungs. That turned out fine. I'm like, yay. So meanwhile, there's just like all this waiting kind of in between. I didn't even share, like we had sold our house in a couple days. So I was living with me, and the kids were living with my 89-year-old mother while Michael was in Savannah.
Yeah, so that in and of itself is traumatic and dramatic alone. And then let me just acknowledge, you've been in Erie, Pennsylvania your entire life. Like you never, you went travel for school and whatever, but in turn, your entire adult life with your family and children, and you never had a homestead somewhere else, et cetera. And so all this was happening while this was going on.
Oh, yeah. And I didn't even mention, so when this was all going on, we had a bid on a house, and we were a week away from closing when this all happened. And so we had to make a decision, like, what do we do? And so we prayed about it. We both decided, like, let's just let go of the house because we don't know what's going to happen. The realtor's like, you do understand if you let go of the house, you're never going to get it. And we said, we understand. And then he called back and he's like, they're probably going to sue you despite the circumstances. But
one more layer on top of
one more
whatever
layer.
was going
So
on.
we prayed
Yeah.
about it again, and we decided it was almost like a boomerang. The house wanted us, so we decided to go forward and just trust God, trust the universe. So anyway, this doctor was relentless. It turns into then a third surgical biopsy where they remove, and I quote the doctor, a chunk of your lung. I mean, there was just no bedside manner whatsoever.
Wow.
And it just turns out, thank you, God, that I just did not have cancer, but I have a very rare lung disease. And it looks exactly like metastasized lung cancer, which is why it was so complex and complicated. And they thought what they thought. September, they put me on like a low dose of steroids that gets rid of this chronic cough that I've had. And then I moved to Savannah October 1st. It'll be 2 years, I think, like in 2 weeks, where I had the pulmonary embolism. And I've seen kind of every doctor you could possibly imagine, and every orifice poked, prodded, like everywhere. As it turns out, it looks like I have, which is really actually quite amazing and a blessing, just very severe, what's called silent reflux, which is kind of a form of acid reflux that probably caused the lung issues. But I still firmly believe that I'm going to have a full healing. So I have another diagnosis.
It was interesting, Allison, when you were going through that. It was hard for me as your friend to hear what was happening and the drama behind it. And the hard part for me was that I always just had this sense that it was an initiation, and I felt bad about that. You're like, I remember you saying, "Shaman, heal me," and that my spirit was sensing that there was just not just, golly, you went through it clearly as just you outlined. And I don't mean to diminish that, but sometimes initiations are dramatic and hard, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't even know how to define what I was feeling, as far as what the lessons were, what the initiation was about or anything. But I just had the sense that everything was going to be okay. And again, I felt bad about that because I wanted to be there with you in your suffering.
Oh, no, but like I needed somebody like you. And I had, I'm incredibly blessed. Looking back, I had beautiful people like you in my life, some healers in my life that could hold that possibility, because was it 6 to 9 months of that I was on a crazy high dose of steroids, which really just made me a bit crazy, but also like a spiritual awakening was kind of within that space as well.
I know you call it crazy, and yet, hearing the angels in the MRI that day, like you did, that really allowed you to get through that. And then the medicine that you were on, all I think part of the initiation, and you were so gracious in sharing your learnings with me as you were going through it. I mean, fundamentally changing, similar to what we talked about in the last episode with ChatGPT, and you getting this prompting to send that to me, the poem. You were prompted to send me your learnings on Saint Teresa of Avila, the mystics, these great mystics, reminding me of the Hail Mary poem and all of that, which really primed me up for what I was about to go through. So it was really interesting.
Yeah, and the mystics and other worldly things were happening like left and right. There was a saint that showed up, Saint Raphael, and in the form of an intern. And I was going through one of these procedures. I was petrified. And, they were like, can so-and-so, do you mind? He was an extern. Would it be okay if he sat through your procedure? And his presence was beautiful and lovely and incredible. And just when I was feeling completely like untethered, feeling his presence, like I just remember sitting in the basement, and he was talking to me. He wasn't engaged. He was just there, like holding the space. So I had lots of different kind of mystical experiences.
There was like honest. A sense, right, that this intern was that.
Yes.
And so it was, and he was.
And my acupuncturist was huge. I was seeing her twice a week. I still see her, once a week. But I remember just being on her table, and I would hear in Savannah they have like these tours, like the horse and buggy tours. But my grandfather had an ice cream business, and the way they delivered the milk and the eggs and the ice cream at that time was the Clydesdale horses, and I would be on the table.
It's like that in Erie. Did you have a milk box on your?
Yes.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah.
The milk was delivered to our front porch.
I know,
How
right?
crazy is that? We're so old.
I know.
Goodness
But like
gracious.
the Clydesdale horses, and so they would go by. So it's like I really felt the presence like of my grandfather, who I never met. He had passed when my mom was 14.
Beautiful.
So yeah, all these different experiences. I mean, I could kind of go on and on and on. And yet the learning and the growing. And I know my acupuncturist is like, you're going to learn to walk this world in a very different way. And
So that's what I was
yeah.
going to ask you. Like, so walking in a different way, is that part of the initiation? Like, what we say, this happened, this was an initiation. What does that mean to you?
I mean, I'm still kind of in it. I wouldn't say I'm like on the other side, but I would say, like historically, I've been a type A personality. Go, 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 never stop, much, like kind of take control. And I just feel like, well, first of all, I just can't walk very fast anymore. So it's like I'm just, more slow, more engaged. My siblings like have witnessed me as just more present,
More on purpose,
listening
sounding?
more. Yeah.
Like on purpose, each step on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. To what end, though? Hearkening? This initiation is hearkening what in you? What is it? What is it conjuring in you? This initiation.
I think present moment awareness, being present, slowing down.
So that.
I think to bring that to others. Yeah.
Well, you're doing that today. That's beautiful. Beautiful.
So tell me about yours.
I so confidently said, Allison's going through an initiation and had peace in my spirit about it. And I felt bad about it, as I said, and then I said, oh, it's September? You're telling me your story, because mine happened September the 9th. And this is a year into yours then. Exactly.
Yeah.
I wasn't, as we just said, some things you sign up for and some things you don't. And some things we sign up for and we don't know what's about to happen. And there was a workshop that I had been avoiding taking for 20 years. In my community, there's a workshop that was developed out of San Francisco that was for gay men who had HIV/AIDS, who were unable to be loved and touched, because we were, even in our own community, before we understood the disease, the virus, we were afraid to be with one another. And so we are lovable, touching humans just in general. We all need to be touched and loved. And so this entire segment of our community was not being touched and loved. And so this fella developed a program to bring gay men together to be together in a safe way, as safe as the science would allow at the time. This is 40 years ago. They just had their anniversary, the 40-year anniversary of this program. And as the science got better, the touching was more intimate, and really was a way in which gay men could be together in that way. And it was a kind of a sexual way, not sexual way, but really hearkening to our sexuality as men. What are our bodies about? Not being ashamed of our bodies. And because of my upbringing, I had all kinds of danglers, I call them, just things that are dangling on my spirit about my shame of my own sexuality and my own body parts even, and the shame of loving who I love, and the shame of having been molested at 6, and all of that, having been disowned by my mother for who I am, and disowned by a lot of my family and friends, and then the shame about talking about my sexuality at all, or even sometimes thinking about it. When I met my husband 30 years ago, it really was a gift, because It really was. I know that spirit, that God is love. I know that. And I know love manifests itself now as I'm older in 1,000 ways, be it through the Sacred Heart, as we said, or through the Buddha, or through shamanism, or through nature, or what have you. And so, but if God is love and I'm in love, then how can that be wrong? And so meeting Jeff was the beginning of my healing around that. But as I was doing this work out west with School of Lost Borders and Center for Counsel, I was running across all these other men who were wanting to do these deep spiritual work as well. And they were gay men who had done this particular workshop. And it was like, maybe one day I'll be able to do that, but I just can't muster up the authenticity and the courage to do it. And so when I got to the farm, I thought, how now it's about to be completed. Like, how can I use it? How can I serve with it? Who do I want here? I want my people here. I want healing to happen here. So I reached out to that organization and said, hey, I've never done your workshop, but I want to offer the farm up as an opportunity for you to come and do that. And I'd also like to take the workshop when you do it here as an exchange for payment for, whatever. And so they say, oh, well, matter of fact, we have one coming up in 2 weeks in Atlanta. It's full, but we'll make room for you. Why don't you come and check it out? And so I did, and I was full of myself on my way to Atlanta thinking, this is nothing. I mean, my goodness, I fasted in the wilderness. I'm going to show up in a grounded way with my people, and worked through so much of my sexual shame and all of that, and I'm just going to show up in a big grounded way so that I can be supportive of others that are there, because look at me, aren't I something? It was kind of very that. I mean, not in a dramatic way, but I did feel pretty self-assured when I went.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know that feeling for myself. For
you
sure.
do?
So,
Yeah. And so I went, and I showed up fully, and I engaged with the strangers. There were 11 men in the group, and I engaged with all of them, and in an intimate way, meaning they weren't strangers when I met them. Hugged them and said, I know, having done all these workshops, so that by the time we're done, we're going to be like brothers. So let's be like brothers on day one, because we are anyway. We're in the gay community, and we were all of a certain age, probably 50. And there was a guy in his late 30s there or so. But and so despite knowing about this workshop and despite signing up for it, you think I would know more about it, but I really didn't know about it. I know my intention was to release sexual shame and to release the things that my mother's disowning and all that hurt as best I could with my people in this workshop. And but what I didn't know when I got there was it was a ceremony. And I don't know why I was so naive to not realize it was a ceremony. And so there I was, open book, open spirit, not protecting myself in any way spiritually, just kind of showing up. And I was sitting with men who were in deep grief, having just lost partners, and there was a lot of grief and stuff. And I didn't know these men, and I didn't consider any of that as being relevant. And so I just showed up fully and open, and we started with, the workshop started with, share a breath with me. And so we all, and throughout the workshop, share a breath with me. And then there was this learning. I have never done any breath work workshops. And for y'all who don't know what breath work is, it's guided on how to breathe, to evoke, again, to conjure the human spirit. It's beautiful work. I just didn't know that this was going to be part of it.
Yeah.
And so then he gets out the drum. Well, I'm all about the drum in my shamanic practice. And so now we're breathing with the drum and all of that. And then, the circle got real intimate with these gay men in a way that I didn't expect, but was all in because I wanted to release that which I was carrying, and I wasn't going to hold back. It took me 20 years to do this workshop. And so fast forward to day 3 of the workshop, and there I am laying on this table blindfolded. There's 5 tables in the room. 5 men are on the tables. And we have these intentions. Mine, again, is to release all of this stuff. And then they put a note at the end of the table, how do you want to be touched? and then the spiritual music playing in the background just very loudly, and this drum playing, and the leader telling you how to breathe, and it ultimately was to culminate into what they call this big draw, where you take this big breath in and hold it and clench your body for as long as you can. And then you let it out and you hold it for as long as you can. And they gave you a demonstration of how to do it on day 2. And so, I'm like you, like I'm type A, like I'm all in. Like I'm all in. You want to tell me to hold my breath? I'm going to hold my breath longer than anybody in this room. Like I'm going to clench harder than anybody. I'm conjuring all this stuff up in me so that when I release, I'm going to let it out, you know? And they instructed us to bring these a sheet with you. So I had the sheet laid over the table. And if you know my husband and you stay here at the farm, you're going to be sleeping on sheets that are ironed.
I know. I was watching him iron.
Yeah, he's ironing sheets. I mean, so I've got this beautiful pressed white sheet that's laying over this table, and I did this big draw, and it's important to note, because I had these hands, because they were rotating around, I'm blindfolded, so I didn't know whose hands were on me, so it's just so naive, right?
Yeah.
And they're adorning my body with oil, and they're putting their hands on me, and it's not a sexual workshop, but it's about sexual energy, the workshop. And so the men that had their hands on me were, I don't know, it seemed nefarious. When in shamanism we say in the middle world there is malevolent or trickster spirits. And it felt very that. Like not from everyone. There was some innocence, some benevolence in the room, but there was almost like I'm going to say this, but it was like a demonic laugh, like it was weird, you know. And they instructed us we could stop at any time, and I don't know, even though I knew I could, I was there for a purpose, and so I laid there in spite of, and then my neck started hurting really bad. And so you were telling these people what to do, rub my feet more, rub my back more, whatever you were saying. And that's why I just said, my neck is hurting. And this guy leaned in and whispered, that was really weren't supposed to talk to you. And he leaned in and he said, my neck hurt too. I'm going to rub your neck. I'll rub your neck. Everything's going to be okay. I'll rub your neck. So here's this man. I don't know who he is. He's rubbing my neck and kind of whispering in this creepy voice in my ear. And so anyway, then it's the big draw. So you draw in big and hold it. And of course, I held it longer than anybody else, and then clenched my body as tight as I could. And my neck was hurting so bad. And then I released the tension in my body. And then I wept. I cried. And all that came up was, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so grateful. And I don't know why that bubbled up. I was in pain. It was but that bubbled up. And then they take this sheet and they wrap you in it like a cocoon. So this fresh white sheet is now being lifted and dropped over my sweaty body. And I'm weeping under this, what is the cocoon initiation, to emerge from this cocoon, a butterfly, or in this new way. And I held it as a steep ceremony. This is what was happening. And so I emerged, they took the sheet off, and the sheet was soaked. I sweat, but I don't sweat like this. This sheet was wet. And I had promised it to another fellow who had not brought a sheet. And knowing that I don't sweat terribly, I thought, you can just use my sheet when I'm done. Yeah. But it's like someone had poured a bucket of water over me. Yeah. And so then it was my turn to get off the table, and it was my turn to be the one rubbing and doing the table. And even though I was in pain, I just continued to do it. But what was notable to me is the guy who was sitting next to me, who I knew was the one who was laying on the table now, and I know he was the one rubbing my neck. When they were instructed, he was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He was saying things that were inappropriate and loud, and the instructor turned up the music even louder so as to drown out his odd rants. And but all I remember him saying, and again, it was like in a demonic voice, and then he said, "Good boy."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I'm rubbing on this other fellow over here, and I was like, and I'm in pain, and so that's been haunting me since that day.
I can see why.
Right, because was it some spirit in him that that caused this injury in me, because what happened was I herniated disc 6, 7, like, and that evoked the sweat response in my body, which was why there was like a bucket of water dumped on the table, because my body lost all its moisture. And that was on September the 9th, which it happened in September for
Yeah.
you too.
And we
So
both have September birthdays.
it's so weird, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I had the worst headache ever, and I got home and I ate something and I felt a little bit better. And actually, we were supposed to start this podcast in October.
That's right. Yep.
And I had a meeting with Allison the following day, and I sat down to talk about moving forward with the podcast. And the moment I began to talk about it, whatever rushed right to my head, and I had this tremendous headache.
That's right. I remember that.
And so it has been a year of physical therapy, injections in my neck, and this what I have learned has been an initiation, because similar to Allison, I was doing. When you come here to the farm, you'll see how beautiful it is and everything that from the abandoned house that it was, and I was just working with my shamanic teacher around bear medicine, and bear is about going into and hibernating and going in. And the inquiry is, how am I contracting and how am I expanding? And I was just expanding. And so similar to you, there was this need to slow down. There was this calling to slow down, and I didn't know how to slow down in my everyday life.
Ditto. Yeah.
I didn't know how. And so this initiation showed me how. I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I cried myself to sleep, And so similarly to Allison, I was prompted in the spiritual way, all the things that she had gone through in her initiation that she shared with me was now part of my initiation. Like, I'm on the mower, I'm mowing for hours because we've got all this acreage, and I'm saying the Hail Mary like 1,000 times, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm not a Catholic, but I'm thinking, if 1 billion people are saying this prayer, how can it be bad? And it was just, and by that, it was what was prompting, was calling up in me to do this, to say these things, to say these prayers, to create prayers, to walk the labyrinth, and I remember distinctly being because the animals here are meaningful, and they speak to me, and I celebrate them. I celebrate the dragonfly when it flies by, and I think it's showing up for a reason, right? And I remember early on in my injury, I saw a dragonfly while I was outside in the shower, and I just wept because I couldn't care. I couldn't care.
Yeah. And I think that's a powerful thing to bring up, because I did go through this deep spiritual awakening, and then when I went off the steroids, then it just went in reverse. And there was a spiritual aridity, a spiritual desert, and I just couldn't access. And I remember I was out here visiting, and I was saying to you, like, I can't access joy. I can't access happiness, which, when you look at steroids and going off of them, I went into a deep depression. So it was the opposite.
And so now what? So now we have been, you still have some lingering things that are going on with you, and I still have lingering things happening with me. I can speak for myself in that there's just a tremendous amount of gratitude for having gone through what I went through. I can't believe I'm saying that. First of all, I'm just shout out to my husband, who's absolutely amazing, who was there for me, despite me not being able to even get out of bed, and was understanding and compassionate and loving and caring. And even when I couldn't be that for myself, he saw hope. He saw light at the end of the tunnel to encourage me. And here I am at the end, coming out of this initiation, more grounded, more on purpose, more, if not now, when. My health is so important, and now I am. And so grateful to be sitting here with you today, Allison, talking about this on the other side of it, and witnessing you looking better, feeling better on the other side of what you're going through, and also in sharing that together, sharing that initiation together, and then saying on the flip side of it, we're coming out of this together in a powerful way, that we're bringing our medicine, our learnings to our people, back to you, the listener, to remind you that whatever you're going through, it might not just be what you're going through. It might be a calling to what is next.
Sure. Yeah. And it's like leaning in to one another during these times, to people who've also experienced these initiations, because people who haven't gone through it don't get it. So it can also feel very lonely and very isolating. And I think, being type A and being dramatic, like I wanted big dramatic results. And a huge learning for me, I've just been in this concept, this idea of like micro changes, micro movements. And so I have, like inch by inch, I feel better. It hasn't been dramatic. I'm not on the other side. There's days where I feel gratitude and there's days where I feel rage. So, because I'm
you're
still
moving your feet nonetheless.
I'm moving my feet nonetheless.
I'm proud of you for doing that.
And it's a little bit faster. And here we are sitting here doing this.
How about it?
Huge.
How about it?
Yes.
So yeah, what are you going through out there? What challenges are you facing? What initiations are happening to you? Is it divorce? Is it graduation? Which is divorce is kind of a graduation in some regard. Is it an illness? Is it what is it? Is there a call in your spirit? That in and of itself, just the calling to initiate. You know, this lack of ritual and initiation in our culture is, it's in our DNA. It really is who we are. We've forgotten. We're trapped in the scroll of doom of the phones and barely inhabiting our own lives. So.
Yeah, and there's not like a better initiation, a worse initiation, a wrong initiation. Right. It's tuning into, maybe you're going through it now, like Sean is saying, or maybe you've gone through it in the past, but you will definitely have one coming up. I think none of us really, it's more like, do we want to do it with open eyes or do we want to do it with closed eyes?
And do we want to do it alone or do we want to do it together?
Exactly.
I'm so glad that we were able to do it together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As I was saying earlier, you can go into these initiations like with open eyes or closed eyes. And I think we're pretty brilliant as a culture of discovering, we just know all these ways to check out, to go through initiations with closed eyes. So we are really looking forward to our next podcast and talking about technology. Because, as I think the theme that has really emerged in our podcast is some of these things can really serve us and help us. And then they can also really get in the way and we can numb out. So we're looking forward to talking more about technology and ways, we're going to touch on ways it serves us, but more in ways of how we might check out, but then how do we navigate it? There's certain things, like there's certain addictions, like for example, alcohol. We don't need alcohol, so that's an addiction. But like it's tricky when we have like a spending addiction or a food addiction or a technology addiction because it's not going anywhere. We do need to use it as much as we might not want to. We need to. It's just the way our culture is operating.
Yeah, it's almost like forced on us.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't have a choice, but we do. We do.
So, some of us get caught up in it. So we're so curious to explore how we navigate it, how we've navigated it, and curious about like how you also might navigate it in ways where you can have more of a balance and paying attention more to when it serves rather than gets in your way.
Yeah, because we were talking about having a dime in our pocket when we were kids, and now look where we've come. So we're able to witness all of that in our lifetime and kind of talk about how different it has, how much it's changed and how it impacts us and what are we doing with it. And we're going to talk about that, like she said, on our next episode.
So thanks so much for listening. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, and do everything you can this week to conjure the human spirit. See you next time.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Conjuring the Human Spirit. You can connect with us and even make plans to work one-on-one with Sean at McGuireLife.com and with Allison at viespritcoaching.com. That's VIEESPRIT coaching.com, or tap the links provided in the description of this episode. Until next time, remember, you're not alone.